Welcome to another episode of the Chronicles of I'm Mr. Pierre, and I'm so grateful and looking forward to this conversation to have with Mr. Craig Richard, aka the Bioengineer. I'm really looking forward to this. So, Craig, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this conversation because seeing your content online, you have such a great way of explaining things, which I don't think a lot of people are accustomed to seeing. So for folks who are just, I guess, meeting you for the first time on this podcast, how would you describe yourself?
Well, I'll tell you a little bit about me. I'm a PhD student in bioengineering, and I've always known I want to do something science related, and I like science, so I like talking about science. It was kind of, I guess, a natural extension of that, and I guess I like to teach in some aspects. Maybe in a more informal setting, I like to, just talk. I like to have casual conversation with people about science. So I would say that about me. Yeah.
And so you said that you teach, but it's not in a formal setting. What is the thing that sort of drew you to being able to like explain or teach folks about science? Is that something that you've always done?
I think, yeah, I've always done it in some capacity. Before the pandemic, I used to do a lot of STEM outreach. So I did like STEM demonstrations and these kind of more formal university-led or small group organization kind of STEM organizations. I did outreach through those channels. But after the pandemic, a lot of that changed, and some of the outreach, the ways that we did outreach kind of changed. So I kind of shifted during the pandemic to talking about science in a more online and a more short form format.
And have you found the sort of engagement to be something that is has that increased, decreased? What's been the sort of like I guess the response to what you're doing now that you're doing a lot more online?
Love it. Yeah. And like I always have people commenting on my post saying, "Oh, I'm going to share this with my son or daughter," or like, "I'd love to have you teach a class one day because I love the way you explain things and just break things down." And some of my high school or like middle school teachers have seen my TikTok posts. Like, "Man, I would love to have you come back and talk to my class one day." And for me, that's really gratifying hearing that.
That's dope. Yeah, that's dope. And the program that you're in right now, you said you're in that PhD program. Exactly what is the concentration that you're going for?
So my concentration is in cancer nanotechnology. So I'm designing nanoparticles to study the tumor microenvironment. Specifically, my research is using these infrared active nanoparticles combined with infrared spectroscopy to study cancer biomarker status in breast cancer. But this work is generalizable to a couple different types of cancer. If a cancer has a biomarker, it can ideally be targeted with this type of approach.
And in your program, do you know how many folks look like you? How many Black men are studying this?
I'm the only...
Or in this concentration?
Yeah. So I've actually had this conversation with a couple people before. I'm the only Black American in my program. There's there's a Black Nigerian guy in my program, but we're the only two Black men. And there's two other Black women, but that's it.
Okay.
But yeah, I was.
And do you know how many candidates there are in total?
I'm sorry?
No, I was asking, do you know how many candidates there are in total? So you said there's two Black men, two Black women out of...
Yeah. I guess... So per year, there's about 20 or 30 people in a class per year. And in my class, I was the only Black person. And, I was the only Black person in bioengineering at my university for, I want to say, at least 2 years. And then several other Black people joined my program.
And the reason why I asked, because the genesis of this podcast is me as a Black man being a teacher in the States, particularly math. I make it was 2%. It's now a little less than that. It's about 1.3, fluctuates between 1.3 and 1.7. And so I was wondering what the number was for PhD candidates, particularly the concentration that you were looking for. But
Yeah, I
knowing,
don't
or
know off the
from
top of
what
my
you're
head,
saying,
no,
you
but I
being the
know
only Black
it's not a
American
lot.
in your class,
It's very low
yeah,
numbers.
yeah, yeah. And so, I guess my question is like, what drew you to that? What was it? What was the genesis for you, and what led you to this concentration, and particularly being going for what you're going for?
So, kind of in high school, I knew I liked engineering and I liked like biology and medicine, and I was like, how do I combine those two? And then we had like this kind of career project. We had to like look at different kinds of fields and see what's out there. And I saw bioengineering, and the light bulb just like clicked on. I was like, aha, that's it. And the more I read about it, and the more things
Dope.
I consumed about bioengineering, is like this is the perfect major for me. It combines all of my interests and all the interests that I could have into this one field. And what's really nice about bioengineering is it's such a broad field. Um, and I've been able to explore those interests throughout my undergrad and grad school career.
Who's been sort of a mentor in helping you on this? Because you're saying like, hey, you found this field and then you dove into it. Is there anyone who's like really helped you out?
Ooh, I would say the person that I looked up to, they weren't necessarily my mentor, but my grandfather.
Mm,
He was, and well, my
nice.
family as well, my family as a whole as well, because I'm a first generation college student. But my grandfather really pushed me to like, hey, if you want it, you have to go for it, and to keep on keeping on. Like you got this. Don't let anyone stand in your way. So yeah, and I really looked up to him, and actually,
Awesome. Awesome.
he inspired me to get into cancer research, because probably when I want to say in middle school or high school, he was diagnosed with prostate cancer, and he passed away in 2014 from
Mm.
complications from that. So, kind of watching that process and seeing, the effects that cancer can have on someone, that really kind of led me to wanting to pursue cancer research.
And all the things that you've been learning, if you were to look back and ask your like younger self, or you could tell your younger self something like, knowing what you know now, what would be one piece of advice that you would give your younger self in regards to
Ooh,
all
man.
the work that you're currently doing, and knowing like, hey,
I would say, oh man, just take it one day at a time. Like even if you fail, or
hmm,
even if this is not perfect, that's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect to work out, or to to work it, because I think I've struggled with that a lot. I want something to be perfect, and if I can't realize that goal, it's not worth pursuing sometimes, like that. But that's like the perfectionist. I was in like the
hmm,
gifted and talents program, so like things always came easily to me, and at some point things
got it.
stopped coming easy to me. So it became a lot harder to like motivate myself to do these things that were difficult. Um, and if you don't know research, if you're doing any type of research, there's a lot of failure in research.
Yeah.
You only see the successes in research,
Ooh.
so you don't see all the failure. And no one tells you that in research about
Yeah.
research.
Right. That's such a good point, because I do think that we will at times look at, like you just said, look at the success and think that the success came, from page one to page two, successful,
No.
and us not being there day in and day out, day in and day out, day in and day out, and seeing, like you said, all of the failures that led to that success. So having that grit and staying at it, yeah, is super super important. Yeah. What was that like for you growing up, being in that in the special program where, like you mentioned, things were just coming to you easy?
I mean, it was nice. It was a nice environment. I was able to explore my interests, and just kind of look at what I was interested in, and do those things. And it encouraged me to just kind of think out of the box. But I think it also kind of sheltered me a little bit,
Cool.
to like how other classrooms are run, or how they're like the real world is. Because it was just kind of me and my twin brother in that program, with the rest of
Hmm.
the gifted and talented students. But we were the only black people in that program, so you get used to that, being in that environment.
Hmm. Hmm. And when did it stop, or when did you feel as if like, all right, it coming easy to me was no longer was that in high school? Was that in college, or
I
did
would
that
say,
happen
yeah,
when you started
college.
your
It
PhD program?
happened in it's
College.
college was like a wake up call. It was like, oh, okay. Like, you know, I like did all these like AP exams and like, you know, all the like the extra credit college credit courses. But then actually sitting in a college class, that's very different than
Hmm.
in a high school. And I was really lucky. I was part of a program called the STEM Research Scholars Program at LSU, and the program
Hmm.
had the goal of taking people like first generation people or people who were passionate about STEM and getting terminal degrees in that program, and kind of nurturing them and you know giving them the tools to succeed in those fields. So I was very fortunate to be
Awesome.
a fellow in that program.
That's dope. That's dope. And I'm thinking of knowing that the listeners to this podcast, there are those who are like, look, I know I want to get into that field. I just don't know how. What would be some advice that you would give? What direction would you point folks in to be able to, like you said, like to get to what you're doing?
As terms of research or just the uh, types of studies that I do, like the kind of material that I talk about, or what.
The types of studies that you do.
So if you want to get involved
Yeah, the types of studies
in
that
like
you do.
research or yeah, in terms of like engineering, well, you have to be on top of your math and like for bioengineering, you have to have an understanding of biology, chemistry, biochem. Uh, you need a kind of a solid foundation in that. And even if you don't have it, you can learn it along the way. It's not set in
Hmm.
stone. You can learn. So I would say that. As far as research, you want to get involved in
Okay.
research that involves, you know, reaching out to a professor. Um, so for example, if you're an undergrad and you want to, you know, work in a lab, you have to reach out to a professor and say, "Hey, I'm interested in you know your research, and I'm interested in potentially working in your lab." And then you'd set up a conversation and go from there.
Hmm.
But one thing I would do before going into that meeting is actually reading some of their papers. You would want to read some things that they've published, some things
Hmm.
that their lab has done, and you want to be able to you know talk about it and say, "Hey, this is interesting to me. I would be interested in doing some type of thing related to this." And you want to go in with that at least a little bit of knowledge to arm yourself with.
Awesome, awesome. And is there an educator? Was there an educator, or is there an educator for you that sort of like nourished or sparked that interest for you, whether either in undergrad or now in the PhD program that you're in?
Ooh, I I was it's hard to say because I was always interested in science. So like, I mean, my all
Yeah.
my favorite classes were science classes. It was okay. I was the person that took all of the science classes that my high school offered. I got an award for it. So like, there was
So
no.
basically, what you're saying. My bad. Go ahead.
No, I was that guy. I took every single science class that my high school offered. So I was like, tell me what you know. I want to know it. So I was like best friends with all of the science teachers.
I'm chuckling and cheesing because in my brain I see a young Craig, like Miles Morales, just going, or Peter Parker, who's like going to all the science, going to Doc Ock before we know that Doc Ock is bad. Like, you're learning from all the greats and wanting to be in all their classes, doing all the things. So in my mind, that's what I saw. I saw a young Craig just like
Yeah, and you
basically
know,
getting ready to
and
get
that
hit
kind of
by
happened.
Spider
So
number 42.
as part of our kind of like senior design thing for high school, we had to shadow a
Yeah.
person that was in our respective field. So my parents would,
Hmm.
you know, drive me back and forth to LSU, and I worked with a professor there to do some bioengineering research. I was essentially I was taking a plant and making it express green fluorescent protein. So I was making a plant glow,
Mm.
So I was taking the gene GFP and using a bacteria and inserting that into a tobacco plant. And so I had made this tobacco plant that
Yeah.
glowed in the dark.
Awesome.
So
Awesome. We're gonna see that storyline in a future issue of Miles Morales. That's what's up. Nice. Is there a book or a book that you're reading or a book that you've read that you're like, man, this is such a dope book? It can be either professionally or scholastic, or it can be something just personal that you enjoyed reading that you've read lately that you'd highly recommend.
let's see. A book that I not lately, but a book that was awesome and it kind of helped me
Mhm.
kind of along in like learning about cancer and the cancer research field. It was a book called The Emperor of All Maladies.
Yep.
I actually have it right here. I'm gonna grab it.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's this book, The Emperor of All Maladies, by Siddhartha Mukherjee. So yeah, in
Nice.
learning about
Nice.
cancer, this
And
was a really good book to pick up, I think.
awesome. So if anyone is interested or wanting to learn about cancer, the title one more time is the
The Emperor of All Maladies, Biography of Cancer by
Emperor of All
Siddhartha
Men.
Mukherjee.
Cool, cool, cool. And if you were to create a playlist with at least 5 songs, it could be more than that, or it could be 5 artists, 5 albums. What would be on Craig Richards' playlist?
Ooh, Kendrick Lamar.
This is always a tough one.
Damn,
Always a good
yeah, that
one.
album.
Okay.
I have to. Probably my favorite song on the album is TNA. I know, but like,
Okay.
like, yeah, that like I can play that on repeat. What I've been listening to
Apropos.
recently.
Okay. Kendrick.
Uh, I've been listening to a band I heard on TikTok called The Fluorescents. What's that song?
Mm-hmm.
I forget the name of the song, but they're on TikTok and they're called The Fluorescents. So they're good.
Florence. Okay. That's
Um,
2.
let's see. What else? What else? Have I listened? Oh man, it's hard to. What else have I been listening to? I just my music tastes are all over
It's a
the
head
place,
scratcher.
so it's just like kind of whatever I'm doing that day. And I listen to a lot of like lo-fi when I'm working, like lo-fi jazz or like lo-fi hip hop kind of things. So things like that.
Nice. Lo-fi jazz, lo-fi hip hop. Sweet.
Let's see.
So that's 4.
Ooh,
If you want to get
New
motivated,
Chavez. So if
what
you've
are you
heard of New
throwing on?
Chavez, the person that wrote the soundtrack for Samurai Champloo, I listen to a lot of him and artists that are kind of related to him. So bands, or I guess groups
Okay.
like Sign, CYNE. What else? Yeah, that's about it. Yeah.
Cool, cool. Excellent, excellent. So, folks, what I'm taking as a gem from this particular conversation in this episode of the Chronicles of Mr. is one, Craig saying how some things may come easy, but having that motivation when it's not easy to be able to work through it is super, super important for any of the young kiddos who are listening. And young kiddos, you can still be in high school and be a young kiddo.
Absolutely.
Reach out. Reach out to those mentors, those people who you want to work with, in order to be able to gain or be able to at least have access to that person or persons to be able to learn and get into the field that you're interested in.
And
Don't stay silent. Like, the worst that could happen is the person says no.
yeah, I would also
Reach
say
out.
to ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Because not
Yeah.
everything is going to come easy to you. And,
Yeah.
some people have the resources to
Mhm.
help you, or they have the knowledge to be able to, break it down and explain it to you in a lot easier way to understand. So, yeah, ask for help. It
Absolutely.
cannot hurt.
It can't. It can't. So, folks, I'm hoping that you enjoyed this conversation. I'm hoping that you enjoyed this this particular episode. I know I have. There are a couple new artists that I'm going to be listening to. Sign is going to be one. As soon as this podcast is over, I'm going to start to download and listen to their music. So, Craig, thank you very much for coming through.
Thank you for having me.
I'm Mr. Pierre. He's soon to be Doctor. Oh, it was a pleasure, my guy. This is awesome. I'm Mr. Pierre. He's soon to be Dr. Richards, and this has been another episode of the Chronicles of Mister. And we're